because you know what I told them folks?
What'd you tell them?
I said, you all can go to hell. I'm going to Texas.
Hello. My name is Mark Fort, your program host, and you are tuned in to another home studio produced edition of the Texas Music Office's Texas Music Mixtape. Today we catch up with Texans Charlie Vela and Jonathan Leal, the creative duo behind the multimedia album Futuro Conjunto. Producer and filmmaker Charlie Vela and Stanford University doctoral candidate Jonathan Leal are also both musicians and natives of the Rio Grande Valley. With Futuro Conjunto, they've created a sci-fi narrative transmedia project set 250 years in the future that features audio, video, and animation. It's a brilliant bit of post-apocalyptic world building that they do, though Futuro Conjunto is absolutely rooted in the real world of the Rio Grande Valley, the 100-mile floodplain along the Texas-Mexico border that follows the Rio Grande all the way to its terminus at the Gulf of Mexico. Futuro Conjunto is presented as a website which participants can explore, accompanied by a digital album available on Bandcamp. And it tells the story of a young Texan discovering a damaged bootleg recording of a concert that took place in the year 2120 in an abandoned rocket facility in Boca Chica, Texas. Let's jump right into our interview with Vela and Leal, who are kind enough to take time out of their busy schedules to speak with the Texas Music Mixtape. Jonathan and Charlie, welcome to the Texas Music Mixtape. Could you provide our audience with a little background on how this project started and how the two of you initially met?
Yeah, this is Charlie speaking. In 2017, I co-directed a documentary about the history of Rio Grande Valley underground music with Ronnie Garza, and the film was called As I Walked Through the Valley. We premiered it at South by Southwest 2017, and we showed it all over the place. And Jonathan reached out to me via email from Stanford University, interested in holding a screening there, and then also interested on doing a project about kind of contemporary Rio Grande Valley artists and music. So that was a compilation album that we put out in 2018 called Wild Tongue, which featured a lot of local artists writing songs about the Rio Grande Valley, and that project kind of dovetailed more or less directly into this new one. As when we went out to go do the screening, Jonathan told me about a class that he had been teaching with a professor at Stanford about speculative fiction, and we both just got really into talking about it, and we both have a deep affinity and love for science fiction and speculative fiction, especially post-apocalyptic kind of stories. Jonathan, maybe you can talk about the class a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is Jonathan, by the way. So the class that I was fortunate enough to co-teach with Professor Paula Moya at Stanford was called After the Apocalypse. And the whole idea behind the class was to create an opportunity for students whose backgrounds were in the sciences, computer science, a variety of different fields, to come together and to take a humanities course that would engage things that many of them were already interested in. And so a lot of folks were interested in science fiction and speculative fiction. So we decided to work on this class together. And the premise of it was that by the end of the class, they would have read all these novels and worked on their own creative work, so that they would end up pitching their own post-apocalyptic fictions to the whole class. That would be multimedia and would draw on everything that they had learned about how books work and how culture works and how history works. And so Charlie and I were talking about this, and this was right about the time that Charlie and Ronnie came to screen their film at Stanford. And then a few months went by, Wild Tongue came out, and Charlie was looking through some conjunto and corrido records that he had collected, and he sent me an email out of the blue that basically was the seed for the record that we've just finished, which was Futuro Conjunto. So, Charlie, I don't know if you want to tell that part of the story.
If you're just tuning in, my name is Mark Fort, your program host, and you are listening to the Texas Music Office's Texas Music Mixtape program. We are currently in the middle of an interview with Texans Charlie Vela and Jonathan Leal, the creative duo behind the multimedia album Futuro Conjunto. Some of our listeners will be familiar with Vela, and his work is one of the co-directors of the documentary As I Walk Through the Valley. The interview picks back up with Charlie Vela talking about Futuro Conjunto.
Right, yeah. So, I mean, it felt like at that time, even more so now, but things feel apocalyptic now, and I worried that some of these kind of impending calamities will disproportionately affect places like the Rio Grande Valley, as we're seeing now with like the COVID, death toll is being, it is a catastrophic thing happening here now, disproportionately to the rest of the state. And so I was thinking about things like climate change, things like hurricanes. Hurricane Harvey had just hit Houston, and I was thinking, what will the stories be, or if people were writing corridos about these events, or songs and stories, ballads about things that had happened, like what will the ones being written in the future be about or sound like, or like what are the big events that are going to be commemorated in the song in the future. And so it's when I talked to Jonathan about that, we both kind of started generating ideas about what some of these things could be, and that sort of was the impetus behind writing this project together.
And did you guys have the post-apocalyptic story set and locked before COVID-19 hit? Or did the pandemic adjust the story and kind of change how you were telling it? I mean, was it just sheer synchronicity that your story lined up with what was happening in present-day culture, or did you respond to what was happening with our pandemic?
Okay, so I mean, yeah, we started this project in late 2018, early 2019. So it was done and written and recorded like a good deal of time before this occurred. It sort of, I think the only kind of thing that we added to the project in response to what is going on right now is in our website we have this kind of interactive timeline that breaks down sort of the future history of what's going to happen here in the Valley. And we started it with COVID-19 because it is an event that is too large to like be absent from our story or from our history. And as you go further into the timeline, it becomes more of what we kind of imagined. It's funny because one of the songs on the album is about a mega hurricane coming and kind of decimating the Rio Grande Valley. And part of the story of the song is like, what happened basically in Puerto Rico is what's going to happen here. Like, there's no help. People are just kind of left to fend for themselves. And it's like, I was thinking about this morning as, stories of like what's going on at some of our local hospitals with, some of these awful kind of cases of patient neglect. It's the same thing, except it's just, we just got the natural event was wrong. It's the exact same response.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Texas Music Office's Texas Music Mixtape program here on Co-op Radio, Austin's community radio. We're in the middle of an interview with the team behind Futuro Conjunto, a multimedia speculative fiction concept album. Let's hear the song that co-creator Charlie Vela was just speaking about, El Hurricane de Valle.
Hey. Dijeron Narciso was coming to town. Hey!
Thanks, y'all. We're La Mosca en la Muere. Stick around for Simonada and, of course, Sochi. I know that's why you're all here. We'll be at La Plaza Mall just handing out some demos. Welcome, give us a chat. All right.
That was El Hurricane del Valle, track 11 from Futuro Conjunto. Let's jump right back into our interview with Jonathan Leal and Charlie Vela, co-creators of the Multimedia Project.
That song is called El Huracán del Valle by La Mosca No Muere, which is the name of the fictional band that performs it. Pretty much the name of one of the founders of Conjunto Music. He was called El Huracán del Valle. That was like his nickname, or his kind of like professional, nickname. And so we named the literal hurricane after him. But yeah, I mean, it was the same kind of it's the same kind of thing is happening like in reality right now. It's just a virus instead of a weather disaster. But the year's still early. Like we might still get a shit this year too.
There's so much story that happens within the world of Futuro Conjunto. It really unspools like a narrative screenplay. Did you two have to write in plot points like you would a traditional screenplay, or did you have to just know the beginning and end and then plot how you got to the end? How did the story unfold for the two of you?
That's a good question. This is Jonathan. So when Charlie and I first started working on the narrative aspect of this back in very late 2018 and early 2019, we started just by generating, like Charlie was saying, like possible disasters that could occur in the future. And also, but not just disasters, possible technological advancements, political advancements. We had a master spreadsheet or document that just had all of that stuff in there. And then that evolved into a short story draft, where, the idea of a concert in the future where you would have a bunch of bands playing corrido inspired songs in these different fictional genres. That came into the picture as a way of supplying a kind of scaffolding or narrative structure for the world that we were creating and the stories that would inform that world. And then as time passed, we ended up with an actual script. So we plotted the whole thing out. And then that script, it wasn't calcified or set in stone by any means. Like we would use that script, in the recording sessions with the contributing artists as a kind of jumping off point. So there was improvisation, details that were added in the moment. And then the final version of it, of course, was the thing that came together in the actual edit, which Charlie and I did in the late hours of the night when the COVID shelter-in-place orders went out in March and April.
Right. And, and the details of, like, some of the events that are referenced in the songs, like, we worked those out, in parallel with finishing the music portion of the album. Like, we would, we had the idea to kind of create these, Wikipedia-type entries that would be read, and as a way of kind of making some of the headcanon actual text that somebody could go through. And so we were writing that all the way up until near the very end of production on the entire thing.
If you're just tuning in, you're listening to the Texas Music Office's Texas Music Mixtape program. We're in the middle of an interview with Jonathan Leal and Charlie Vela, the co-creators of Futuro Conjunto, a multimedia post-apocalyptic futurist project set in the Rio Grande Valley, where both Leal and Vela are originally from. Charlie and Jonathan, I have to admit to you, I was a little confused as I was listening. I wasn't sure whether the music was created by different bands, pre-existing bands, or if it was, you guys working with singers. How did that work? I mean, to my mind, it seemed like these were pre-existing bands and you guys were just hiring them for this project. I mean, because even though the music spans multiple genres and genres that you're inventing, there's still a very cohesive feel to the album from start to finish. So were they pre-existing bands that you hired for the project or no?
Actually, no. That's
wow.
Really
so
cool. That's really cool to hear that it felt that way.
It absolutely
it worked.
comes across that way.
The bands are wholly creations of Jonathan's mind. Like, we kind of came up with the names. We played a good deal of the music back and forth on various songs, and kind of give them backstories and tried to make them characters in like bands that were characters. But generally, like, the collaborators that we worked with were just providing vocals. On one song, we co-wrote it with on the Zoss track. We co-wrote that with Rudy Sebla and Diana Tazar, who are they're engineers that work at my recording studio with me, and they have their own project called Gemini. But by and large, like, all of that music was done by Jonathan and me in this kind of hot potato kind of fashion, where it was like, one person would work on it, send it to the other person, and they would work on it, send it back, and then we would get together a few times when Jonathan would come down to visit, and we would work on it very intensely, and just sort of break it apart and rebuild it, and break it apart and rebuild it, and trying to have a logic within the musical choices that were happening, like why does this, which started with in the initial draft of the script that Jonathan wrote, he kind of invented a bunch of just kind of genre names that we had to figure out what they sounded like, and then trying to build a logic into, like, why they sounded that way, like what instruments do these people have access to, what are the influences that this band is drawing from versus that band, and really the through line is that they're all sort of, or mostly telling or singing songs that reference some historical aspect, and that's what we take from the corrido tradition, is like kind of telling these local histories through music. But stylistically, the bands of today and the bands of 100 years from now are going to be drawing from all kinds of different things, not just like one unbroken musical tradition.
That's even more impressive and just blows me away that you two were able to create so many different feels, as Brian Wilson would call them, or such different feeling and emoting bands with just the two of you, and the two of you working with different vocalists. For instance, the song La Madre de las Estrellas, pardon my poor pronunciation, if I'm being very literal in my mind, that was what I was expecting Futuro Conjunto might sound like. But then when I heard the song Heat Death, I was taken aback as it was totally different than anything I was expecting. It is so beautiful and ethereal sounding. I don't think people in general realize how many different genres of great music come out of the Valley, but Futuro Conjunto definitely displays that.
Thank you so much. And that was also, I'm really, like, it's really great to hear that stylistic variety was like a part of the enjoyment of the project too, because at least personally, one of the things that I got out of watching Charlie and Ronnie's documentary, which we the two of us carried over into Wild Tongue and then into this project, was how enjoyable it is to be able to feel that variety, or to hear that variety like in a single project. So it, like, in a way, it kind of feels it's not totalizing, but it feels a little bit encyclopedic, or like it's built by contrasts rather than by similarities. So I'm really glad to hear that it resonated.
Let's listen to one of the songs that we were just referring to. It's called Heat Death. It is by the fictional band called Seminada, and it appears on Futuro Conjunto, the multimedia album and project by our two guests today on the Texas Music Mixtape, Jonathan Leal and Charlie Vela. I wanted to ask you guys, if we were to end on one song, what was one that was your favorite or just unexpected that that you really are enjoying from the album?
Personally, my favorite song is the Zos track, just because it's just so heartfelt. I love the vocals that Rudy and Diana did on it. You know, the kind of the decision to make it sort of this Astro Bachata style was like pretty late in the production process, but it was one of those moments where it all kind of coalesced, and it felt like we had really stumbled into something special on that track. So for me personally, that's one of my favorite ones. And, you know, like what they're singing about is sort of this a different take on, you know, just this kind of this traditional theme of like, you know, the person I love is gone, but you know, it for them it's like the reason that they're gone is because they're on a mission to Mars, and something about that was just really fun to think through, and that it could be like this intensely like sad and human thing mixed with this fantastical thing. I really love that.
All right, we'll let the song Amor Superno take us out. And thank you guys for appearing on the mixtape today.
Cool, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you so much.
An astronaut, a shepherd, he spoke often of adventure. My love, he vanished into space, assigned to a far-off place.
Y yo pregunto por qué me fui sin pensar en que lo que nos iba a suceder.
Past the moon, they took you towards the stars and looked for you. Send my love through the space you move. Oh, off to Mars they shipped you. If I could, I'd let the stars carry me too.
El trayecto ha sido difícil. Estar tan lejos de ti ha sido lo más que duele. Ya no puedo estar aquí.
You made me feel like floating high above this broken earth. For years I felt this hurt.
Tú eres la luz que busco en la oscuridad cuando no estás.
Past the moon they took you towards the stars and looked for you.
my stream's about to die. Okay, I'll be right back in a second, yo.
That's our time for today's Texas Music Mixtape. We will tip our hat and see you next week.